can show up on the video the same way you do on stage? Think again. Being virtual demands a different kind of presence, one that isn't just confident, but magnetic. Now, on today's show, we're breaking down what it really takes to pull people in through a lens, whether you're leading a virtual summit or delivering a high-stakes year-end meeting. And we've got a seasoned media professional who spent years behind and in front of the TV camera for news and who understands what it takes to make presenters shine on screen. You ready? Let's go. Today's guest, Shirlee Engel, is a former national TV reporter with 20 years of experience. Built her first business to six figures in the first year using strategic video storytelling and has sustained it every year since. It has helped hundreds of entrepreneurs become magnetic on video. I'm going to let her take it from here because she'll do a better job of telling you her story than I will. So welcome to the show, Shirlee. The floor is yours. I'm not even putting a timer on you. You just
Oh,
go.
no.
You're
You're going to
welcome.
regret that. Thank you so much and appreciate the opportunity to be here. I am a former television reporter who used to have to deliver things very, very stoically and could have no emotion and no opinion. So make no mistake, I'm not here to teach you how to be a reporter. That is the last thing I want you to be. And that really is a big part of my story is, I have the confidence, I have the presentation skills, but when I became a business owner and I launched my first business as an interior designer, of all things, that's a whole other story I will save for another day. But I realized that I had to show up very differently as a business owner than I did as a television correspondent. And so there was a really big learning curve for me on social media and a very humbling one, actually, because I thought, hey, I've been on TV for all these years. I got this. I can grow an audience. Boy, was I in for a rude awakening because I knew nothing about marketing. And I knew nothing about, how to show up as my authentic self and just be me. I was like editing out all my screw ups. Don't do that. So what I was able to do is really start from the ground up, build a brand. And then it's not enough just to produce your own content. Visibility is about getting in front of other people's audiences when you're first starting out. So I got a spot on a TV morning show as a design expert, and people started seeing me on TV and then started the inquiries from other entrepreneurs. Hey, how are you so good on TV? How are you so good on video? How are you doing this thing? So I started helping business owners with their visibility and their on-camera presence. And that kind of blossomed into what I'm doing today, which is helping entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, and executives really show up as the authority that they are on camera without losing that essence of who they are, that authenticity that in today's day and age, in the age of AI avatars, we need that more than ever.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think one of the problems, Shirley, is, and I'm speaking for myself, is that we just assume that I'll show up as big and positive. I'll show them that Rob Jolles that they see on a stage virtually. I mean, it's the energy and enthusiasm. It's got to carry the day. And yet, I think there's some mistakes that we make. They don't transfer over perfectly. So you take the wheel here. What are some of the biggest mistakes that speakers like me make in just thinking that if we just give them our A game, that's going to carry the day virtually?
Well, I'll tell you the first huge mistake that not just professional speakers, but in general, people who are trying to speak to a lens, imagining that you are speaking to 500 or 1,000 people. You are not. When you are speaking to a lens, you are speaking to a single person. Yeah. And then the second mistake is that you're speaking to the lens. You're actually not supposed to speak to the lens. The lens is not human. The lens is just this tiny little thing at the top of your screen. And so what you need to do is to project yourself almost like through the lens in order to speak to that actual person. And what I always tell people is imagine a real person, your spouse, your best friend, your ideal client, or a client that you already serve, or a colleague, or a boss, or whatever it is, whoever you want to speak to, you want to reach with your message, because you will speak to that person very differently than if you're on a stage and you have all these people to speak to. It's a very different experience. It's different body language. It's different energy. There's an intimacy with the camera that I think most people lose when they try to be their public speaker self.
Yeah. So the experiment that I performed my first year of virtual, where I literally, and I know what that word means, meaning I did this, okay, practiced looking to the side, the center, and the side. In other words, I was imagining that there were those 500 people. And I figured,
Hmm.
I'll give them some head movement to simulate that. Now, for me, it felt pretty good. But I don't know what it looked like on the other side of that lens. And from what I'm hearing from you, maybe a little confusing.
Yeah, and very impersonal.
Yeah.
Because if you think about yourself, we all have smartphones, we
Yeah.
all consume content,
Yeah.
all kinds of content. And when you are looking at the content, you are one person and you want to feel, particularly if you're someone who wants to have influence, who wants to, build an audience, build an authority, credibility, trust factor. If you're not connecting with that person, then they're just going to continue swiping to the next 600 people who do the same thing you do.
Right.
Because no offense, but all the knowledge in your head is not original. ChatGPT knows all of it and then some. So, what makes you different is the way that you interpret the information, the way that you convey the information, the way you tell a story, the way you use your voice, the way you use your body, and the way that you can make the person on the other side of the lens feel like you're literally like, you talking to me? Oh my God, he's talking to me.
Yeah.
And you don't get that. Like, you do get that. I'm not saying you can't get that in person in a room of 500 people, but it's a very different experience. The other thing I wanted to mention that's really important is from the perspective of a public speaker in a room full of people. One of the biggest things is you get your energy from the audience. You get your feedback from the audience. You can adapt in real time according to how your message is landing. You get that two-way street, that feedback loop, right? And it's not that you're changing yourself or how you speak, but you might approach a crowd of, lawyers differently than you would approach a crowd of comedians, right?
Right.
So when you're talking to the lens, it's a one-way street. You don't have that feedback loop. So you have to create it in your mind. You have to know what they're probably thinking, right? So I know what you're thinking now, right? So that's a real skill that I think is also important to develop, and that a lot of people, when they start in a virtual speaking type situation, they really need to develop that skill.
Yeah. I saw some years ago, I went to a Carole King concert. I don't want to lose my man card. My wife dragged me there, but I did enjoy it. Uh, and I will tell you, it was called I think it was called like the living room concert or the concert in the living room. But her stage setup was a couch, a throw rug, her piano, a lamp. It was very homey. And I really thought it did something to that. I saw it at Wolf Trap. I saw it with, a couple thousand people. But it really kind of personalized it. So my question, Shirley, is this. And I think, I don't want to give away what I want to hear from you, but I think we underestimate this. The background virtually. We're focused on our lighting. We're focused on our mic, and we should be. We're focused on our appearance. But what about the background to complement what you just said?
Absolutely. That's a whole factor that you either have no control over when you're on a
Hmm.
stage, or you probably don't think that much about it. You can't change much about it. Your background is just as important as all the other things around you.
Right.
Now, that said, there are a lot of different options with your background, right? So, my background is pretty busy, right? I've got the wallpaper, I've got the bookshelf, I've got all the things. I'm also an interior designer. So when somebody shows up on a call with me and they're looking for design help, if I've got a disaster of a background or an ugly bookshelf, how credible am I really? Like, why am
Yeah.
I in that space? And then a lot of people will say, okay, well, I don't have a nice background, so I'm just going to do a virtual background. And those are awful because the second you move, there's like a
Your
strobe
ear
or half your
disappears.
face
Yeah, things like that.
disappears or
Yeah.
something like that. So, and then there's the issue of distractions. I once, did a session for some members of parliament and some politicians because I was a national political reporter. And one of the examples that I showed as a what not to do is, one of the politicians had a giant moose head behind him. And this is no judgment of people's hobbies. You do you, but that is really distracting. And an object poorly placed, either growing out of your head or growing out of a shoulder. Remember, the camera crushes depth differently than three-dimensional. So something that looks either really far or really close in the foreground could be completely different in real life. So you do want to take a bit of time to do a little test shot, right? Like you want to have before you're on, you want to look at your shot and say, is there anything behind me that could be distracting, that could pull the viewer's attention away? Like people who have too many books behind them, I'm often like literally going like this with my head, like, what's he reading? Think about what are the things in your background that could distract. At the same time, there are also a lot of things you could put in your background to enhance what you're saying, to show your credibility. If you have a product, for instance, that you're selling, or if you are, an executive or you're somebody who wants to convey a certain level of authority, well, does your background match the story? Right? We're all telling stories here.
Right.
And so there's a lot of considerations that go into that, but I think a lot of people tend to overthink this a little bit and stuff their backgrounds with too much stuff. Or they go the other way and they have a completely white wall, which we call a hostage background. Like you don't want to look like you're in a hostage video, like just the white background behind you.
Right.
So there is a balance and it is different for everyone.
Okay. So let me throw my 2 cents in. Do you see any of me disappearing right now? I hope not.
No.
I am a fan of, I'm with you. The virtual lazy background that the computer's offering is not going to do the trick. But a physical green screen is a legitimate option. And that's,
Absolutely.
for instance, what I'm using right now. And so I can switch from a podcast to a coaching call to an appropriate seminar background without having pieces of me disappear while I'm doing it. But that's not easy. I mean, we had to do some work to get this thing where we wanted it. But if this is our profession and we're delivering virtually, I would pay attention to this background. One last thing, Shirley. I don't know about now. This study is at least three years old. But back in 2022, there was a poll done by and what they tried to figure out was of the four critical areas: signal strength, camera, sound, lighting. I'm adding a fifth, so I must have doubled up on signal strength. But anyway, one of them was background. So let me see if I can get all four: background, camera. That's kind of signal strength, sound, and lighting. From the customer's perspective, it was they were the ones that were polled. It was background that was the single biggest distraction to them over the other three. So we can't undervalue this. How important we're going to show up the way you want us to magnetically. And to me, and we're going to get into it right now, I'm sensing that magnetic isn't just confident. Okay, we're reaching for another gear here. So let's roll there, because confidence just isn't enough on video. I'm a pretty confident guy, but you used to have a beer with me. You'll see. But we're talking about a virtual delivery. What's the difference between being confident and truly magnetic when we're talking about virtual presence?
Yeah, so this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, right? Confidence is an internal state of being. It's all about you. So you can be confident, but that doesn't mean you're going to attract the audience that you want, whether that's colleagues, whether that's opportunities, whether that's customers. In order to really be an effective speaker that meets their objective, you need to be magnetic. You need to not only project that authority, that credibility, that trust, but you also need to lure people to you with the way that you speak. So magnetism is literally what it sounds like. There's you, there's the person on the other side of the lens, and you're looking to collapse that gap. You are looking to bring them to where you are, to your side, either to, work with you, book you for your next speaking gig, whatever it is that you want, the action that you want them to take. You need to magnetize them. And so there are certain techniques of showing up, of speaking, of delivering, of messaging, which we haven't talked about either, that allow you to be that kind of effective virtual speaker, that just simply showing up and being confident. I mean, that can either come across as cockiness, it could come across as insecurity. You might feel confident on the outside. And I've seen this a lot with many clients who are like, well, I'm confident on camera. I don't need to really learn camera confidence. Well, no, but you don't come across that way. You come across as really buttoned up and arrogant, or you come across as nervous. It looks like you're sweating. Are you sweating? No. Are you shaking? Like, are you okay? No. Are you nervous? No. I'm pretty confident. Okay, well, you don't look confident, right? So just because you internally feel a certain way, it doesn't mean that that is being translated through the lens. And conversely, if you're showing up and your heart is beating 20 miles a minute, I mean, I'm sure, even in a public speaking in a room, this happens. This happens to me. I get in front of a group of a ton of people, you can hear you're like, can they hear my heartbeat? Should I move away from the microphone, right? But they have no idea,
Right.
because the way that you're presenting yourself can actually mask the real terror that you're feeling inside. So I think that's the best way I can describe to think about it, that moving from an internal state of being to an external stimulus that attracts a person to you.
Okay, so this is the zeroid in me, the Xerox guy, where everything was a process. Are there some repeatable, predictable things that we can do to accomplish this? Because you had me at hello. I want it. Now, and ironically, sometimes the harder we fight for things like this when we don't have a process, the more awkward we become. So I don't want the audience to see me fighting that hard for it. What are some things I can do to demonstrate or display this magnetism?
Well, I have like all these frameworks, and we probably don't have time to jump into too
Give me
many, but
one. Give me
I'll
one.
just give you a couple examples.
Right.
So I like to break this down into sort of three different pillars. One of them is what to say. So before you even say a word, you need to know what your message is. You need to package your message in a way that it lands virtually. And that's not necessarily the same as when you're on a stage, right? Because you have less time. Attention spans are, out the window. People in a room listening to you are sitting there, their butts are in the seats, but people online, they have the power to just swipe. So you have to approach it a different way. So messaging is a huge thing, what to say, how to say it. In addition to, before you say a word, what is your body language like? Are you watching yourself back to make sure that, maybe you're, standing a certain way, or you do something with your eyes, or, when you have like broccoli in your teeth all night and someone doesn't tell you, that's the same thing that happens on video. You can have some really awkward thing going on and nobody's going to tell you, oh, by the way, Rob, you had something in your teeth in that whole take, or something
You
like
reached
that.
for
So
your hair. You reached for your hair when
I
you
reached for
first
my
started.
hair and then I was like,
And you went,
can't
that's
use
not
hair,
going to work
can't
with
use
Rob.
hair.
I'm going to teeth.
Not gonna
I
work.
just want people who aren't watching this on YouTube to understand that was not lost on me. But please continue.
Oh, wow, you're really perceptive. So, I mean, hair is one of the usual examples I give.
Uh-huh.
So there's that. There's the body language aspect, right? And that's a big self-awareness piece, which is a huge part of developing that magnetism. And then there's things like your voice, right? Your voice when you're speaking on a stage is a little bit different than when you're speaking to a microphone, because there's things you have to remember about speaking to a microphone where you can't do the same techniques. I mean, one of the public speaking techniques is you change the volume of your voice more dramatically. You're taking people through a story. Well, you have to watch things like that with a microphone, because then we're having to get into post audio and making sure that, the peaks and valleys and all that technical stuff. And then the biggest piece too is that connection. And how do you know if you're making a connection? Well, this is where data is so important. So, depending on where you're showing up, in the absence of the audience that you can actually see in person, you need to use the data from what you're doing virtually. So if it's social media, that's your analytics. If it's you're doing a webinar, that's attendance rates, how long do they stay, things like that. You can really, are they engaging in a chat? Are they commenting on your posts? So you need to take your feedback from those cues, which are data points and also qualitative points. What are they saying in the chat? Are they asking questions? Are they engaged? So just because you can't see them, it doesn't mean that you're not mindful of how it's landing. And then it becomes a loop, and you start to build on your magnetism based on the feedback you're getting by understanding your data, understanding what your audience wants and doesn't want, responding by doing less of what doesn't work and more of what does. So it is a bit of a different way of thinking about it, but it is also an evolution, and it's not something that you're either born with or not. Anybody can develop magnetism, but it's very unique to the person as well.
Yeah, when I work with speakers, and I don't work with them on this at all. I'm loving this. Uh, I, you know, I think first of all, I'm with you. Anybody can improve. Anybody can get much better at what they're doing. If you
Mm-hmm.
come to me and you're a 2 out of 10, I can make you a 6 out of 10. I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
make you a 10 out of 10. If you're coming at me at a 7, maybe we can take it to 9. 9, yeah. Let's see what 10 looks like. But I feel like anybody can improve, and particularly if they just commit to their style. See, I got the style on this side. You're giving us some great points on technique, which is, they're separate. Unfortunately, people put them together a lot, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try and do exactly what you're doing, and I'm more copying your style than your technique, and now I'm not authentic, and here we go down the wrong road. So I see the separation between the two. You're a wealth of information on this. I am curious because I did some acting and I did some directing. Okay, from your perspective, doing some reporting and getting behind the camera and in front of it, where do you think you learned the most about this type of magnetic delivery? I'm assuming from both sides, but did you learn one from the other?
I would say being in front of the camera and being in front of the camera and posting on social media. As I said at the beginning, that was one of the most humbling experiences for me because either the deafening silence, which we've all experienced when we first start, did they like it? Is it right? Did I do it right? And so I think the magnetism that I had to develop, and I'm still developing, is really truly understanding what lands with people. And so another part of that is completely unrelated to even what you're saying and how you present yourself. Are you asking questions, right? Are you engaging people and are you inviting them to participate? Because part of the magnetism is sort of overcoming that, like, they can't reach out and touch you. You know what I mean? So you need to invite them to your side as well with what you say. So there's the nonverbal cues of like the body language, and I learned a lot by watching myself. I often tell the story after I had my first daughter and I was nursing, I was going live a lot. And I noticed when you go live, there's like a little screen where you can see yourself as you're talking to the camera. So you can see when you're coming up. And I noticed I was always like this. And if you're watching, if you're listening and you're not watching, I have one shoulder up and the other shoulder down. And it was because I was always nursing my daughter and, holding the baby and everything. Well, no one's going to come up to me and tell me that. Surely your shoulder
You
is
look like you're nursing. Yes.
a little, or not even that, but like, what's with this? You know
Yeah,
what
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean? So I think just that very humbling practice of watching yourself back, which is so hard and is still hard for me. I still hate watching myself back because if I really truly acted on what I thought of what I looked like when I watch myself back, I would never post anything
Yeah, yeah.
because there's always something, right? So I think that this is one of those things that you got to try it. You've got to watch yourself back. You've got to see how the audience responds. Ask them questions to elicit. I often will say, well, what kind of content do you want me to post? What do you want to hear from me? Tell me in the chat. And even if you're doing a webinar or some kind of virtual presentation, you need to be able to feed off of that. You need to create that and invite and push the audience to come meet you there. And so it's a very different approach, but I think that it's by doing and showing up that you really learn the most.
Agreed. And I just want to put an addendum on that. I think it'll help people to remember that when you watch yourself back and you immediately don't like your voice and don't like your shoulder or your ear or whatever it is, could you do us all a favor? Could you balance your feedback, please? This isn't an opportunity to just beat yourself up. Try this trick, and because this is what I do live. I'm looking for the two best things that I just saw myself do. Not four, not seven. I just want to make sure I keep doing that. And so just to ignore things you're doing well is not going to be very productive. And then each time, just balance it out. Two things you do differently. And those are the words I'd use. If I could do that podcast again, that presentation again, what two things would I do differently? And then really think of a game plan of now that we've identified it. Don't just leave it there. What tool do you need? Maybe you got to read a book. Go see Shirlee. But how are we going to fix that? If we just balance it out, it's productive and it's just not a beat up session.
Yeah, and a lot of this is mindset, right? Like we
Yeah,
are constantly running a dialogue through our heads of how awful we are. We're biologically conditioned to focus on the negative because, it goes back to, the caveman days, like the lion's around, I gotta, have all my senses up. Like, yes, it's a beautiful sunshine, but oh my God, I might get eaten tomorrow, right? So we have this biological conditioning to constantly look for the negative, look for the
right,
problems, right? And so when you watch yourself back, you probably won't naturally see, unless you're like really full of yourself. Um, oh, I hated this, or there's, and they're the smallest things that honestly nobody else notices. Like
right,
nobody sees those things but you. Um, and so you fix those things because if you're self-conscious about them, it is going to come across. Your audience is going to pick up on your insecurities. They're going to feel that disconnect. They're going to feel that you are not projecting that confidence, right? And
right.
so that's a really important exercise of being able to not just self critique yourself, but also to give yourself props, like you said, like, look at the positive things about yourself. And that's something I encourage clients to do all the time. Like we'll watch back videos and we'll talk about what worked, what didn't. And then, we will still celebrate. The first thing we do is say, I loved how you did XYZ. Like I'm always trying to think, like you said, of one, two, three things that were really great and then being constructive in the way that you talk about the things that should improve. And I think, when you say that to someone else, if you're polite and you have, you're trying to give constructive criticism, you will say it in a certain way. But why is it that when we say it to ourselves, we're so mean,
Right.
right? Have compassion for yourself, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I wasn't the greatest manager, but one thing I did well, I think, was give feedback, and that was because I had come from the training world where I was giving feedback a lot. But I could ask 100 people in a row, what did you think of your performance there? And 99 and a half of them are going to say, I didn't like this, I didn't like that. So
Mhm.
even learning to start with the positive and saying, okay, tell me the two best, you'll see people go, what? I think they almost can't believe what we're not just hammering ourselves. It's not easy to do, but you're right. I think one of the best things we do, and I do it with my kids too. How would I answer that question if my kid asked me that question? How would I do that? How would I provide feedback to somebody I really cared about? Last time I looked in the mirror, I cared about me too. So let's try and follow those rules a little bit for ourselves. That was a good point you made. All right, let's get a couple more points and we'll let you go. The first minute or 2 minutes for every presentation is really critical, and we all know that. Now, I'm just speaking as a live guy who's live. What, if any, differences should I pay attention to virtually? Because my instinct will be take the stage and go hard to the hoop. Okay, go to that mic. I've learned a couple things. I want to hear from you though. What subtle changes are we going to apply in the first minute or two?
Hmm. Well, I mean, this almost becomes generic speak you hear from everyone when it comes to virtual, but you have to have a hook.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the most overused terms, and I think one of the things that has really disappointed me as a video storyteller is how everybody is now using AI to come up with their hooks, and everybody's hooks sound the same. three ways to XYZ, or have you ever, or, do you feel this? So I think being really deliberate with thinking about how you want to get into something, and is there a story you can tell? Is there some kind of pattern interrupt that you can use? Because the idea is you have to stop the scroll. Again, unlike in a room where people are sitting down and they are here to listen, online, even if you're in a webinar or some kind of situation where people are watching you virtually in a presentation, you can't always see them. They can turn off their camera. They can take a call in the background. They can be working on something else and half listening to you. So it's even more important to really get them right off the top with something that you are with a story or some kind of message. You can't just be physical about it. You actually need to give some thought as to how you are going to approach it. And so, shifting beliefs, having a contrarian take on something, like an unpopular opinion kind of thing, just being original and against the grain, and remembering that you never want to start with, the boring stuff. Hi, I'm so and so, and I'm here to do X. In this video, we will blah, 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 like click. You have
Right.
like 2 seconds to hook them.
Right.
So bury all the stuff about who you are and your life story. Nobody cares. You need to start with a story, an interesting, stop you in your tracks statistic, a contrarian thought, some kind of pattern interrupt. There has to be a reason for people to stop and sit up and pay attention. And we could go down a rabbit hole of what examples
No, we don't need to,
they
because
can look
right
like,
now,
but
yeah. Right now, Shirley, you're kind of giving me what every speaker, I don't see the difference virtually or live on that particular response. Maybe that because there isn't one. But we all, those who've been professional speakers make a science out of opening up a presentation. I mean, what's in it for you, how it's going to help you on the job, a good story or analogy, quote, something I was driving to. We got that. I just wasn't sure. Do we have to go a little quicker? Do we do something, should we be more intentional about being visual, something that's different? And I'm going to interpret your answer as not really, just have your A game in those first 2 minutes, or are there any subtle changes I should be thinking about?
yeah, so there are some subtle changes. So if you're
Okay.
talking about content, because
Yeah.
another thing is that we have to differentiate between content
Mm-hmm.
and like a presentation. So I'm glad you asked. For content, you have to remember that you have your audio and you have your visual, and that a lot of people do watch on mute. So a lot of people aren't even going to hear your voice, right? It's like, imagine if you're in a room and somebody pressed a mute button. How are you going to get their attention? So you do also want to have a hook that's a visual hook. Now, that doesn't always have to be text, right? It could be an object. It could be some kind of movement that catches their eye. It's going to clear my throat here. Depending on your level of skill as a video storyteller, it's always nice to have a bit of some pizzazz in the story. So, for example, one thing that I teach is something called a sizzle reel. And a sizzle reel is a great way to break the ice. So, I have a client in the financial space, and we created this sizzle reel. And essentially, that's like a trailer for who you are, what you do, the whole, your value proposition. Kind of like when you want to go see a movie and you're not sure if you want to see it. So, you watch the trailer and you're like, oh, that looks good. I want to see that. So again, this is something you can do as a speaker in a room as well. But it is really great to be an icebreaker on something like a webinar, like when you're waiting for people to come into the room, or there's a delay, or you're trying to really like razz people up before. Because in an actual room that you're in, you can walk in, you have a presence, right? Whereas on a screen, if you're sitting on a Zoom call, you can't necessarily show things the same way. So that's where something like a quick 1 to 2 minute highlight reel, a sizzle reel, could come in really handy for a specific kind of presentation or something where you've got that captive audience. And then on social, I would just be mindful of the mute button and having a visual hook as well as an audio hook.
Ooh, you really kicked me some ideas in my head on that one. Thank you. I'm a guy who will actually run a countdown timer before a virtual program begins with music. But what you've given me is an idea of having that countdown timer countdown with music, and then roll right into a sizzle reel, some high energy music, some movement, bang, 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 and then welcome. How's everybody doing?
Yeah.
I love
Yeah,
that.
because it's like people seeing the movie
Right.
trailer before you show up, before
Yeah.
you're like the main event. It's like the opening act,
Yeah,
right?
let's charge them up.
And
Shirley,
this works well in
amazing.
person too.
Yeah. How do people get a hold of you?
Well, my main channel is YouTube. I have a YouTube channel that you can link below, and I've got tons of tips for people on everything from, what to say, how to create buzz, and all things in between. So it's a great place to go binge, and you'll hear lots more on all of this.
Right. And it's Shirlee Engel, which is Shirlee
Correct.
Engel.
Ngel. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot of E's
A lot
there.
of people get tripped up by the three E's
The
in a row.
30,
But
yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Listen, absolute pleasure. Shirley and I had a conversation, I don't know, a couple weeks ago or whatever, and we practically did a podcast on that one. And I went, this is going to be a great guest. You were terrific, and so many great ideas. I hope people look you up, look up that YouTube channel. Just tremendous job. I'm really grateful you were able to come in and talk to us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here, Rob.
You bet. Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. For more resources and to connect with Rob, visit thepresentationwhisperer.com.